It's a pleasure to be here. And of course, always there's some technical difficulties, but we're used to that. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm stepping in some big shoes because all the previous lecturers were brilliant. And I hope that you will take something useful from my today's lecture. But let's say, in contrast to what we were used to see, I will not be talking about evaluating, let's say, family dynamics or changes in family dynamics, but more about products, which is a bit sad because on this training school, I see there's more exciting things than measuring the usability and if products are exciting and so on. So moving on. Yes, thank you for the introduction. I'm not native, let's say, in your field, though I do have some background in social sciences. And today I'll be discussing how to design inclusive and useful ICT solutions for families. And let's say in the first half, or let's say in the first part, I will present some research work we did just to illustrate what can be done and how was it done. And then in the last part, I would like to give you some, let's say, additional tips on, as sooner or later you will come in contact with some ICT solutions, as that seems to be the trend in today's world, and that you will be equipped with, let's say, at least a notion of what instruments are there, and these instruments are from your, let's say, more closer field, from psychology and user experience and so on, and additional points to be observant of when designing such solutions, especially in the context for families. Okay, yeah, this is just an overview. Like I said, the first instance we are concerned with the research on ICT usage within families, and upon that research, we try to introduce some novel concept of family-centered design for digital solutions. This is especially for digital solutions because there are a lot of similar, more complex fields that need to be addressed in healthcare and so on that also use this term, family-centered design, but this one is for digital solutions. Then we moved on with making some prototypes. Some were original to see whether we can design such applications that fit family needs. And then was the hard part, to experiment on existing digital solutions to help them improve. And of course, in the end, as mentioned, we will talk about just a brief, nothing too detailed, about some evaluation instruments and some tips for automatization if possible, and the use of recommendation tools. Okay. So first, I must discuss the motivation for the family-centered design development. Within our project work, we detected a lack of systemic integration of the specific needs of families in the strategies for developing these digital solutions. And with that, we also detected a gap in the academic literature that was worth addressing. And of course, this was interdisciplinary effort. I mean, in our research team, there was psychologists, anthropologists, sociologists, computer and mobile application programming, but we must acknowledge that the foundation of our research was connected in user-centered design, so user experience field. And thus, in line with this emerging concept of family-centered design, we have broadened the focus from individuals to groups of people, families in this case. We are not focusing only on the needs of, let's say, individuals as in established industrial fields, but we are moving on the needs of families, which are integrated into common processes, and we want to produce some patterns for and scenarios for positive effects. Of course, all neatly integrated in technical solutions, as we do work in the electrical engineering environment, and usually this is sort of a requirement to produce some practical demonstration of what has been done. Just to expose this, but defining families could be quite complex task, especially for an engineer. But our vision was that family is long-lasting, intimate community comprised of several generations, 2 or 3, including seniors. I saw that a lot of presenters are focusing particularly on the child and parent interaction, while it was very important for us to include the elderly, because they are the ones that sometimes need even more help with using digital solutions. Of course, these generations or target groups have different level of digital skills, digital competences, and of course there are some physiological changes that come with aging. I mean, we are all on the same road, we're all gonna age, so it's sensible to develop solutions that respect these limitations and these deteriorations in physical context, so in vision, hearing, motoric skills, and so on. We saw this opportunity for developing such a concept. It's only a concept, it's not something more, that it would be a good answer to the challenges of modern families and also to aging population. But this could not work only in families. We imagined, since it was very vague definition of a family, it could also work in other environments, such as work environments, healthcare, and so on. Sorry, I'm pressing on all the different screens and things. Okay, so just a second. Our main research field was actually human-computer interaction, HCI. It's more of an academic research field that's based on producing new knowledge and experimentation. And the abstraction that we were interested in was the socio-technological system. So moving from physical to information and psychological for individuals, so personal and IT, to social and IT. And the other side of the same coin is applied field, industrial field of user experience. It focuses on the development of digital products and various standards, industrial standards already use these terms and describe this usability of systems, software, and digital products that makes them easy to use and provide better experience for the users. Strong emphasis is made on the accessibility, which is, let's say, techniques that are coming forward in this field. And it's very important to bring these solutions that are inclusive as possible. Sorry, I have to. So we did this user experience field. There is this practical approach of user-centered design that puts the needs and requirements of the users in front and integrates the users in all the steps of developing these products. Of course, the important part of the user-centered design, of course, are the evaluation methods, because we need to measure the usability, user experience, motivation, cognitive loads, and so on. Our ambition was to build upon this applied area of user experience in consideration and provide some tools in context of these heterogeneous groups, that's just families, which have, like I said, different skills, different interests, different schedules, and so on. Okay, this is just a quick recap of research activities that were packed into 3 articles. And of course, there's a broad range of activities we have used. Of course, first you need to know what is out there, a literature review, and then we were concerned about the schemes and deployment scenarios of such industrial solutions. And of course, then the service and the, let's say, cross-section of how do families use ICT at that moment. That was, I think, 2018, 2019. But of course, we will see that this is subject to change. ICT usage within families has changed a lot during Corona. But there are some particular interesting findings, insights that helped us develop the prototype and later on test on the experiments. So this also, yes, involved, of course, the design and the visual design, the programming of these applications and experiment interfaces, and of course, user testing in closed laboratory environments and remotely testing because due to COVID, we needed to deploy remote testing tool very fast in order to retain this interest in the work we do and also to reach as many people as possible for larger sample. And the total number of participants from, let's say, 2017 to 2021 was about 352. Of course, that's not a high number, as I saw a lot of your posters. Most of you even have a lot bigger samples, but this was our reach, and in my, I mean, not saying that Slovenia is small, but sometimes perhaps we run out of participants quite fast, I guess. Yes, as I saw, in the first instance, we've been concerned with the concept design and functionality specification, which was followed by the iterative refinements of the prototypes, and lastly, very important for us, was the implementation of tools and experiment. Just a quick overview of the preliminary research activities. So we had quite some surveys on specific themes related to family activities. What do they do? How do they spend their time? How do they eat together? How do they divide labor? And of course, how do they use modern technology, which was one of the most important topics for us. But there are a lot of these related family dynamics and family activities that need to be taken into account. And just, I'm not going to explain all the results, but some of the results, of course, were new to us, and some of them were not new, but we were a bit, I'd say not disappointed, but we were hoping for different results. So in Slovenia, about 20% of grandparents live with the nuclear family, so the grandparents with their children and their children's children. And of course, most work is, of course, done by mothers. In 7 categories of work, only men have managed to be better at one category, that is transportation of children, while for the others, it's really skewed toward mothers. And we are hoping that it will not be so high, but it was quite high, because in Slovenia it's typical that both parents work, but mothers then they usually have to do all the housework. So, and we found that the common meals are not so common. I mean, just about below 40% eat every day together, and everybody else spend less time in common meals. I mean, common meals is one of the moments that we defined as a family getting together daily and just seeing each other, if not discussing important things. So this was quite important for me. Of course, they have positive attitude toward technology and usage within family context. And smart TVs were not interesting at all to use, along with e-health technologies, because of the concern with privacy and, of course, for the lack of need. 1/3 of the respondents have a family member that needs care, so whether it be child or grandparent. And most of them, about 2/3, have common family goals, and they recognize this as having this common vision of family life. And those that don't have these family goals usually wish that they had them. We also use this developmental task, human developmental task, and we found that it was quite good fit within our generation structure we envisaged. So children, adults, older adults, and elderly. And this developmental task fit was about, let's say, about 85%, which is quite high because this is, I think it's from Havinghurst. This is one of the broad concepts that we introduced from the social psychology field. But it helped us very much to develop some elements. Yes, and of course, some insights that helped us with making this prototype. Of course, there were some recurring themes, especially with schedule organization, time management, the housework division, and so on. It is important that ICT was used for common good, not distraction, and we tried to design these features of these prototypes that it will help families organize time, not take away their time, which is, I mean, not in our period, but from the literature, it's most important for the family growth, this common time where families get together, they learn together, grow together, communicate, and so on. And ICT, of course, can be used in at least two ways. One is for the, let's say, individual activities, that is taking away this common time. And the other opportunity is, of course, to bring families together, not through, let's say, screens and so on, but to enable them more common time with organizing their schedules better and to divide some labor among all of the participants, all of the family members, and especially to connect grandparents to their grandchildren through some, let's say, tasks that we produced in order to, I don't know, to recommend activities that can help them get together and spend more quality time. And of course, ICT could help alleviate the problem of the aging population, loneliness, and so on, since, like before I said, 80% don't live with their, let's say, nuclear family, with their offspring. And this is a way how to get these families together and closer. Okay, so on top of that research, we designed a family-centered design concept, which was in the end comprised of 5 elements. Of course, there's analysis of common modes of communication and how this normal communication works in typical group. So we produce some, let's say, virtual typical families and try to, let's say, put the user scenarios in them and see whether this would help or not. And of course, this was tested in prototypes in real families, of course. And we will try to replace these weak ties of, let's say, public virtual communities like Facebook and so on with strong family ties for such, let's say, micro social networks of, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people that they stay connected more often. As such, there was a potential for stronger social support through ICT and, of course, through the management of family activities and for the motivation of common goals. Sorry, my throat is getting very dry and I have to drink a lot. So yeah, these family activities are, of course, integrated in day-to-day activities. And of course, we want to overreach these difficulties in spending time together. And we envisaged the ICT as a tool for schedule planning and time management. And of course, it has to be meaningful. It's not just a calendar and task. It has to be inclusive as possible. And also, we have to take into account I'm really sorry, some problems on my side. We have a better engaging experience for all members of the group. And we try to do that also by taking into account the accessibility and other standards and recommendations that already exist. But we have to amend also the relevance of content, because when we talked with, let's say, designers and the program developers and the coders, it's easy to say, look, do this and this functionality, they can communicate, that they can share tasks and so on, but there's something missing. So this is some content that will help us sort of cold start the whole process of bringing families together. And we found this quite easily or opportunistically, I guess, in these human developmental tasks, and which includes, I don't know, everything from, I don't know, for example, for teenagers, it's finding or identity, and for adults, it's managing career and finding their own place and so on. Very, very broad and general topics. But this is something that we could put in, and if needed, we could present it in a way that would mean that would be relevant and be meaningful for the users. And so thus, this prototype application was produced. This is just one of the screens. It doesn't show you really much, but it has all sorts of functionalities. Of course, users log in, they integrate with each other. It's used for communication, but it's also a private shared space. I mean, no outsiders can see this indiscriminately. And it allows for some level of personalization. This was one of the functionalities that in talks with our potential users was exposed as top priority, that they can set up their environment as they please, so that they can choose colors, perhaps the style of the applications, and so on. Let's say the core of this prototype were the tasks, which were self-appointed or administered or generated by the app. These were often household chores to relieve family members, but often they were like common activities, I don't know, common dinners, visiting zoo, grandparents taking children to cinema, and so on. We also added some elements of gamification, which was interesting insights, because we found out that people usually don't respond very well to, let's say, points. They prefer this visual presentation of their rewards, so sort of badges and stuff like that. So the common goals of the family that family has decided to do, it was like something like going for a vacation or doing some, let's say, bigger work around the house were comprised of several tasks, and it was special scenarios that they had to complete. And it was one of the things that was quite interesting for them, because it was not just one task, but it was a series of tasks, and it was a process. Of course, the overview of all these tasks was done through calendar. Of course, this was not a calendar that was always full, and always we had to target these activities quite strategically. I mean, once a week some common activity, and then slowly, if possible, increase it to 2 or 3, but not too much, because it was could be quite a burden for the users. And when testing this product, this prototype, we got some good usability scores from system usability scale, which actually improved over the time of usage. While at first glance, the user experience was quite good, because it was novel, it was something new. But over time, when they get used to this experience, to this user interface, this decreased, not slightly, but visibly. And the workload rating, so the subjective assessment of whether this is hard to use, does it take a lot of time, is it efficient, and so on, was nothing special at the beginning, but over the time they find it more and more burdensome. But this was the prototype. This was, let's say, the easy part. We just took the needs and requirements and some desk research and make some prototype. But then we needed to try to experiment with existing digital solutions, which is a bit harder because there are not a lot of existing digital solutions to amend to families, and we wanted some reach, and this was just at the beginning of the corona, we came up with a solution that was, I mean, it was a sort of compromise. We didn't have these common family scenarios, but we were able to take some elements from our family-centered design and put it into this Slovenian tax portal Idavki, which is probably the most well-known and used portal in Slovenia. We had some luck that they allowed us to do this. Of course, this was not done on their live operations, but we had to capture these interfaces and implement them somewhere else and then customize it and then do some experiments. These elements that we wanted to take from our family-centered design were mainly concerned with the accessibility, so the standards that apply for better usage between, let's say, all generations, and also the content relevance element in terms that different forms were displayed for different generations. Of course, we know that kids suck at taxes, so kids were excluded here. So it was just, and also for the data complexity reasons, we compared adults and elderly in that sense to see whether this solution that we propose makes differences. And we try to gather differences on measured usage, so let's say performance usage, so time on task, and also effectiveness, so task completion rate, and more subjective categories done through surveys of, let's say, system usability scale, user experience question, and also NASA task load index. We wanted to find out whether these differences were between adults and older generation, and also between the different interfaces. This is example how this looked like. I'm sorry, but it's really small. So this was the original interface, and this was the family-centered design adapted interface. Please note that we didn't change, let's say, the service design process. We didn't completely turn it around and put just something that we knew that would work, but it was very minor changes that were documented and, of course, deliberately delivered. And of course, there was quite a challenge because we had to access the private parts of this portal, which is access to the certificate and the login. And then there we had to use some special techniques to gather all these interfaces. It was around 2,000 pages, forms, and so on. And this was not done manually, but it was done through some dedicated tool that we have developed. Just a quick overview. The testing platform was designed in such a way that when the participants came, they had to fill in, of course, they had to get to be introduced, what was going on, why do we need this, and so on. And they put the consent. And of course, there was some demographic questions, so that we needed to put them in some clusters by generation and other traits. And after that, there was this task-based solving and measurement testing done in either of two interfaces. So the original and the adapted one, which was followed after every task. It was followed by the system user, by the few questionnaires for the user evaluation. this task was not something that you can do every day. It was some form that is pretty hard to find. So it was not something that we could eliminate the learning effect, or that they already would know what was going on and find it intuitively. In the end, of course, there was a conclusion, thank you, and some questions about whether do they find this type of testing interesting, or is it burdensome, or what do they think about it in general. Yes, of course, at that time we already had this automated analysis platform, which allowed us to follow these measurements in real time and also provide some results that we have set to show in the research. So we are also already testing for the, let's say, this framework, the null theory framework, so hypothesis theory framework, and so on. Also, we produced a recommendation tool, which was used actually to establish these interfaces, because we needed to respect these standards that apply. So Web Content Accessibility Guide, which is most evolved and most standard, let's say, recommendations used for the web development and also other digital solutions. And we developed something that helped us do this on large scale and see if whether the changes we have done apply to this, apply to this criteria. And of course, there were suggestions how to improve those if this criteria were not met. For the experiments results, there were some mixed results, but some mixed results were evident, but show differences in two interfaces in some parts. And where these differences were, of course, statistically significant, they were in favor of these newly adapted family-centered design interfaces. And of course, it was especially interesting for seniors because they evaluate family-centered design interfaces as better. While the adults performed better in the original interface, seniors performed as equally as adults in the family-centered design interfaces, which was quite a big improvement and thus partially confirming that this family-centered design could be used for such solutions. So, bless you. And this concept in our, let's say, articles presented a good response to aging population and modern family. And of course, it could be applied in practice, as we saw, to design some prototypes and also existing solutions. But it's, of course, for the complexity of it and specific context, and to allow the interaction between users. And of course, it allows improvements for user scenarios that are already implemented. Of course, this is an upgrade to existing user experience field. And it's about, so we did use user experience evaluation methods, which actually derive from psychology. So it's not engineering problem, but it's more of, let's say, people problem. And heavy usage of these standards, Web Content Accessibility Guide, DigComp, competence framework, and so on, were really helpful for us to find these functionalities and to put this concept in such form that it would help others in the future. While, of course, as engineers, we had to design some interactive tools, how to effectively help a design and also measure these changes. Okay, this was badly presented, our research work, and you were asking, okay, great, Jure, you have presented some of your work, but what is it in it for me? Well, as mentioned in the beginning, there are some evaluation methods that perhaps if you don't know them, it could be really helpful when dealing with designing such ICT applications. And talking to the designers and coders. And let's say, instruments, of course, is more focused task-based instruments and concerned with user performance, so effectiveness and efficiency. So we're talking about success rate, how many did they finish the task, and of course efficiency in how much time did they finish the task. Of course, there are some user evaluations which seem to be more subjective than the measured ones. These are standard questionnaires, but the system usability scale, if you have to use any of this one is the one I would recommend because it's simplest and it's considered like a quick and dirty scale for measuring, and it has wide ranges of application, and it has become an industry standard. And of course, even though, I mean, you are just measuring your own product, it can be compared. How does this compare to other products, other digital services? So you know actually on this scale where does your product rank. I mean, is it above like 80% of the useless solutions, or is it just in the area of being usable, or is it very efficient in doing something like this? And for the user experience questionnaire, it shows us, let's say, 6 dimensions. So do users dislike it or like it? Can they solve the task without any unnecessary effort? Do they feel in control of the interaction? Is it exciting and motivating to use this product? And of course, is it something that they consider to be creative? Does it catch the interest of them? Or is it something that has been already seen and not usable to them? Lastly, there's this NASA Task Load Index. It's quite simple questionnaire, but it should measure subjective assessment of 6 factors of mental, physical, temporal, so how much time do they need, own performance, effort, and frustration perceived by the users. Of course, these instruments can all be done, let's say, in physical, in person, through paper service and so on, but of course, there's always a possibility of automating these tools through, I don't know, forms, Google Forms and so on, or like specialistic tools that we have developed. Okay, and for me, it's really important that when considering these prototypes, digital solutions, existing digital solutions, it's very important that they are accessible for all generations. And there's a standard Web Content Accessibility Guide from the World Wide Web Consortium, which is sort of standardization body for this type of things. And they already proposed 78 criteria that respect a lot of disabilities. And it's founded on 4 principles, whether information and user interface components must be perceivable to users by their own senses. Of course, users need to operate by interaction, but that they can perform. In some cases, they perhaps cannot, but they need some specialistic tools, but interface has to allow them to use this. And of course, the information of the operation has to be within the limits of users' comprehension, and it has to be robust. It doesn't matter on which device it should be presented. It should be available to everybody on every device, on every so-called user agent, and also available the present and perhaps taking into account also future technological progress. There are a few levels you can achieve at this time. This is getting progressively harder, and they are always adding new ones, which is quite good. But the lowest is considered at this time to be below the threshold of even remotely good accessibility. And 2 AAA is something that you would find on quite good internet pages, while the AAA, the 2As, the 3As is something that is used for specialistic solutions for the disabled, for the people with disabilities. I'm not sure how much time do I have. Enough? Okay, I have enough time, so perhaps I hope that there will be a lot of questions because I didn't quite explain everything. But there are some lessons that I want to share with you. Of course, digital transformation and digitalization in every aspect of our society is, of course, evident. It's not evenly distributed matter, so we need informed and human-centric approaches to be able to reach, let's say, the user is such, it's not a really good word, but we should reach all the people, all the families, all the groups, especially the ones the most marginalized. Yes, and it is important to involve users, practitioners, policymakers, every stakeholder involved throughout the whole design process. It is not important just to involve them to know their needs, but in the end, this is your platform where you can convey your message. I mean, you can inform them of the follow-up, you can inform them, the policymakers and so on, what can be done in terms of this, and so on. Of course, we must be observant and learn of our own biases, which helps us also to learn about biases of others. Should we act on this or not, that's a personal decision, but there are a lot of biases, especially in the engineering department, sort of, because technical solutions sometimes tend to be like more valuable, but in the end, I see so many psychologists here, and you're really masters of data analysis, and much more than engineers usually. So this is one of the biases that we have to take into account. Because sometimes, as an engineer, it's easier to produce something and say it's good, but the user don't know how to use it. But it's a problem that it's on our side. We must do the products that the people will need to use them, not need, but that they will love to use them. And last but not least, if you only solve your problems on the current repertoire or let's say array of methods and techniques you possess knowledge of and you're comfortable with, it's always good to evolve, to learn some new methods, to experiment, to learn some new approaches, and thus expand your field of not just your, let's say, academic field or your own personal career, but I think this is something that we have rare opportunity to go outside of our disciplines and try some interdisciplinary approaches. Okay, this was fairly quick, I guess. I'm really sorry I was a bit nervous, but I will be more than happy to ask the questions. Perhaps I'm better at answering the questions than I'm presenting. So please ask away. Don't clap yet. So, but okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Euro, for an interesting lecture. And as you said, it's time for questions now.
Yes, please. Yes, Metin.
So this is really interesting, and Sweden is also one of the technologically
Yes.
countries. Pretty much everything is digitalized,
Mm-hmm.
and your this prototype that you presented gave me some interesting ideas, like this connecting people together and then just making them more organized. But also this, I wonder if this could be taken to a different level, because you said this 20% of the elderly people are living with their children, and
Yes.
but 80% are not.
Yeah.
Probably they are living alone. So would it be also possible, are there any initiations to increase the communication and connection between the elderly and their children? Because one of the biggest problems given right now is it worked really well during the corona time. 50% of the households are single-person household.
Uh-huh, okay.
So it helped people to isolate themselves from others very easily, so there was no need for quarantine. It functioned really well. But at the same time, people die alone
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in these households. They live alone and they feel depressed because they don't have easy connection with other people living in the same building or with their relatives and
Mm-hmm.
family members. So I wonder if there are any initiation in the field of ICT to increase this connection, human-to-human connection using
Mm-hmm.
digital technologies
Yes.
other than WhatsApp.
I mean, there's some efforts, I mean, in designing such applications, but this doesn't really mean anything if the users, I'm sorry for this word, I mean, I feel uncomfortable using it because it's just one perspective of human activity. But it depends, if users are not going to use it, it doesn't make really any sense. What we have observed before the corona, and of course, especially during the corona, that families that live, let's say, separated, so elderly people separate from their grandchildren, that there was increase in particular tools such as, I don't know, Snapchat or something like that. I mean, they found out for this, they established this communication themselves. They had some need, but I think it was very evident that it was something that they will not give up, especially, let's say, for example, making short videos of children, first steps, progressing, and so on. It's very important for grandparents to sort of be at that time there, to see it a few minutes after this happened. But these are the tools that are already been implemented and are widely available. I'm not a proponent of, let's say, that we make a specialistic app that has all the needs and so on. I mean, the prototype was a bit of that way, but this was a prototype. It was not intended to go in, let's say, into the into public usage. Because the people solve these problems quite good by themselves. Of course, there are those that need some help, but then sometimes it's not about technology, but it's more about, let's say, emotional availability of peers and so on, and also the, let's say, the sense of belonging to community. So, I mean, in that sense, it's more important to have these activities that bring community together. I don't know, picnics. I mean, of course, there should be some channels, digital, that in parallel can solve and support, can solve some neighborly help problems and also support them in some way so that they are, they have the information what's going on in their building and so on. But in my opinion, it's not an easy solution just to introduce. There's an app for that, and you can use it, and you will be happy. I mean, but these initiatives that you're mentioning, as far as I know, they're not, let's say, technology-based, but are more people-based, people co-creative activities and so on, picnics, I don't know. I hope this was something that has helped you. But yeah, we as engineers, but especially in the old, not old, but a few years back, there was a solution for every work problem was to make an app. But that's really a wrong way to do it. I mean, we all know that. But technology can help us if we are observant of what are the challenges and the pitfalls of using this, because we all know the bad practices from social media, and also one unintended thing when using ICT-based solutions for communicating with children, the parents sometimes tend to control children too much, and I think, I mean, in the research I have read, this is not a good thing. This is something that should be avoided, and trust should be built with children. And yeah, there's a lot of layers to discuss to this. Okay.
Are there any more questions? Firstly, congratulations for your presentation. We know that nowadays
Mhm. Okay, first of all, we need to educate as much as possible. So these are some new topics that are becoming a part of our lives. And it is important that we develop strategies how to deal with this. So let it be data privacy and similar issues, but also to avoid abuse and recognize the abuse on the internet. Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps in the little children it's important that they don't recognize the abuse on the internet and they tell when it's too late or something like that. I think there's all sorts of educational materials like short video clips and so on intended for the children. I think there was one international, it was also translated into Slovenia, but this is something that's not, let's say, concern of, let's say, Ministry of Public Health and widespread, but it's something that you have to find out for yourself, which is not really a good way to go, because then you already know that these topics exist and how to go on about this. This should be directed to people, to the families that don't know what happens out there and what problems can be encountered. So,
I just go in this direction also, because now like we are becoming more suspicious about the taking our digital identity, using this for commercial purposes. You never know, because all these digital devices that we are using now, all the social communication that we get, it's free. It's supposed to be free, but then it goes to hidden algorithms and to go to commercial issues. And it's another topic. This will be, I mean, if I go online, I can find this kind of platforms built by the families or not, or would it be restricted to them?
So the question would be, of course, we don't have to forget that there are commercial interests, of course, in developing every kind of these applications. There are very little effort done to produce something that is not commercially orientated. There are some initiatives, I'm talking about the whole, let's say, software world, that take into account this community building and sharing and so on. But we do have to take into account that there's always commercial interest, and that selling of the data is one of the activities they are doing. It's quite a problem, especially in the social media, where parents or other family members share all kinds of information through unintended, let's say, pictures. Where do they live? What brands do they use, and so on. It is problematic, but how to avoid this, I'm not really sure. Should there be restrictions on, let's say, certain age where they can use these certain platforms? Some were imposed, but children are curious and find something new when talking about children. But for the families, and to go gather some information about, let's say, security, data privacy, and so on, I think it's fairly easy to find if you search for it in Google. I cannot remember of any particular sites, but it really depends. But some of those are quite similar, as one of the lecturers, I'm not sure was it you, showed us these modules for family development and so on. This is, I think they are very similar in one another. So I didn't really answer your question in a direct way, but there's a lot of data, but you have to know what you're searching for, I guess. So.
Because, for instance, in our case, in our platform, we give the materials for them,
Mm-hmm.
and then the people, of course, can go to the forums and things like that. But all these in the platform. So and we have to ask them for giving permission or permission or whatever.
Yes.
Just to make sure, but in a general way, not telling that is specific for you and this is the direct for you and things like that. So we have to be very cautious about that.
Yes.
And I guess whether with this, but on the other hand, I think it's very, very interesting your focus on family, because we are facing a lot of the digital gaps
Yes.
for genders, families, and generations, of course, and also they go against the systematizing thing. So go directly to have the public of the adolescents, go to the children, go to the mothers, the fathers, and that is a nice way. And in Spain, I guess that it will work very well, because we are a family quite cohesion with a lot of intergenerational transmissions, and now we have all the grandparents try to become user of video calls, things in the pandemic situation, and I think I understand the need. What I see is the practical things that now we are more and more conscious about the taking our identity, our digital identity. That's my only concern.
Yes. In my view, I mean, digital identity when dealing with public institutions or government institutions, it's not problematic because there's a lot of protection behind this. And of course, the companies usually take care of this also, especially domestic ones, but international enterprises have all sorts of techniques and mechanisms how to let's say, go around this on technological level. I mean, for example, when there was this GDPR and cookie directive, when you had to say, will you accept these cookies or not, it doesn't really matter if you accept. If they want to track you, they can track you to, I don't know, I can think of at least 5 different techniques to identify this specific computer in, let's say, in the mass of all the other computers and so on. But it's something that was packed into the cookie consent directive, and then that was done. But there's a lot of work to be done on that field, I'm sure. But I'm not really sure who's going to do it, because I know the politicians that are concerned with such data privacy and so on are always in the they have a problem, because they have interests of industry on the one hand and the interests of, let's say, population on the other hand. So, I mean, I've been in contact, not in contact, but one of the persons, which my mentor, who we were developing this concept, is now the digital of the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Slovenia, and she's very keen on these topics. But as I can see, it's quite a challenge, because you have all sorts of trade-offs and challenges, and of course all the stakeholders to take into account, not to mention the lot of work on all different areas of, let's say, digital transformation. But through time and through, let's say, awareness, things will become better.
So I think with these words, it is good time to stop and take coffee. And again, thank you very much, Ulrike.
Thank you.